It's the kind of story that freezes a city in its tracks. A young woman, barely 23 with her whole life ahead of her, steps onto a Charlotte train, earbuds in, scrolling through her phone, never realizing she has just minutes left to live. What happened next wasn't just a brutal murder. It was a revelation of failure, of courts, of transit, of security, and of the very people who should have protected her. On August 22, 2025, Ukrainian refugee Ireina Zerutska boarded the Lynx Blue Line. Within moments, she was gone, stabbed in the neck in front of horrified passengers. The shockwaves of that night still ripple through the city, because this isn't only about a crime, it's about how the system failed her, and how Charlotte is now demanding justice. Ireina's journey to America was supposed to be about safety. She fled Ukraine in 2022 with her mother, her sister, and her younger brother while war consumed their homeland. Her father stayed behind, bound by military obligations. In Charlotte, Ireina tried to build a life. She studied art, specializing in restoration, and dreamed of becoming a veterinary assistant. Friends say she was an animal lover, always pet-sitting for neighbors, always smiling. To make ends meet, she worked at Zapati's Pizzeria, where co-workers described her as the heart of the team. She wasn't just surviving in America, she was thriving, carving out a future. But that all ended on a single night. Surveillance footage shows her boarding the train, earbuds in, distracted by her phone. What she didn't see was 34-year-old D. Carlos Brown Jr., a man with a long, violent history. Without warning, he pulled out a pocket knife and began stabbing her repeatedly in the neck. Witnesses froze in terror, screams filling the train as chaos erupted. By the time paramedics arrived, Ireina was already gone, declared dead at the scene. Who was D. Carlos Brown? His name was already well known to police. Since 2007, he had been arrested 14 times for assault, felony robbery, illegal firearm possession. His mother had openly said he suffered from schizophrenia. But here's the part that has Charlotte furious. Back in January 2025, just months before the murder, a magistrate judge, Teresa Stokes, released him on nothing but a written promise to appear in court. No bail, no monitoring, no consequences. He walked free. And 8 months later, Ireina paid the price. On social media, speculation spread fast. Some claimed Judge Stokes had undisclosed ties to a treatment facility called Pinnacle Recovery Services, suggesting she may have had a financial incentive to funnel offenders into taxpayer-funded programs instead of keeping them behind bars. Now, to be clear, these are unverified allegations. There's no concrete evidence. But the fact that the rumors even exist speaks volumes about how little trust the public has left in the system. And then comes the bigger question. Where was the protection on Charlotte's trains? Transit staff admit that D. Carlos was a chronic fare evader. Security on the CAT system was already strained, 15% of staff positions vacant, with security even outsourced to private firms. Police presence? Practically non-existent. Passengers had been complaining for years about safety issues on the Blue Line, but it took Ireina's death to finally make city officials admit there was a crisis. When Charlotte's mayor, V. Lee, finally spoke out, her response was underwhelming. She avoided mentioning Ireina's name, focusing instead on compassion for mental illness. The backlash was instant. Within days, the mayor corrected course, acknowledging that court and magistrate failures had undermined police work. But for many, it was too little, too late. Meanwhile, Ireina's family was left shattered. Her father, still in Ukraine and still draft-eligible, couldn't leave the country to attend her funeral. Her mother and siblings mourned alone, thousands of miles from home. Their grief became unbearable when yet another controversy erupted. Online activists actually launched GoFundMe pages, not for Ireina, but for her killer. Framing D. Carlos as the real victim of racism and a broken system, They tried raising money for his defense. GoFundMe quickly shut down the campaigns, citing their ban on fundraising for violent crimes. But the fact it happened at all left the community horrified. Misplaced sympathies, people said. Utter disrespect. By late August, Charlotte's City Council finally admitted public transit safety policies had failed. Council member Dimple Amara bluntly stated the obvious. The system wasn't working. Meanwhile, prosecutors hit DeCarlos with first-degree murder charges. He's now awaiting a competency evaluation, with a court date set for September 19, 2025. As the case gained traction, tributes to Ireina poured in. At Zapati's Pizzeria, staff lit candles around a framed photo of her. Friends displayed her artwork, remembering the young woman who had survived war only to fall victim to violence in America. The tragedy quickly escalated into political territory. On September 8th, former President Donald Trump weighed in on Truth Social, blasting cashless bail policies and calling the murder a predictable consequence of soft-on-crime leadership. His son, Donald Trump Jr., echoed the criticism. What really sent shockwaves, though, was leaked surveillance audio. DeCarlos allegedly made racial comments before the stabbing, suggesting his attack may have been racially motivated. Yet despite that, authorities held back key footage, sparking accusations of media suppression and fueling conspiracy theories about what really happened on that train. The debate over transparency has only grown louder. Why has the full footage not been released? Is the racial angle being buried to avoid political fallout? These questions have only deepened mistrust between the public, the justice system, and the media. At a community vigil, mourners placed sunflowers, Ukraine's national flower, on the steps of City Hall, demanding truth and accountability. And that brings us to the uncomfortable truth. This tragedy didn't have to happen. A judge's reckless decision, a system that let a violent offender walk, a transit authority that ignored years of warnings, all combined to put Ireina in harm's way. If a bartender can be held liable for overserving someone who later causes a fatal crash, why can't judges be held accountable when their choices directly lead to a death? That's the question now being asked not just in Charlotte, but across the country. Because let's be clear, Ireina's story cannot become just another statistic. She fled bombs and bloodshed in Ukraine only to die on an American train. That irony is unbearable, and it should haunt every official involved in this case. If nothing changes, if no one takes responsibility, then the system is saying loud and clear, it will happen again. So now I want to hear from you. Should judges be immune from consequences when their decisions lead to tragedy? Should transit systems face lawsuits when safety collapses? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading every single one. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell because we'll be following this case closely, including the September court date and any updates on Judge Stokes. Together, we can demand accountability, amplify Ireina's story, and push for change so no more families have to suffer the way hers has. Because in the end, this isn't just Charlotte's story. It's America's story. And unless we fix the system, we're all just one train ride away from another tragedy.